A very good morning, all. Thank you so much, the Guild and the team, for having me here and given this opportunity to moderate a very interesting topic of zero trust in clouds. We were supposed to be 4 of us, but then one of us could not make it, so we'll still make it interesting between 3 to talk about the topic. But before we really get into it, and I think she very well alluded to the topic of zero trust. In a very simple term, it's about not trusting and always verifying. That's what the theories of zero trust says. But how practical it is, are enterprises really adopting it? Have you got examples, learnings? Forget about the cloud, but even in a non-cloud or an on-prem environment. And when I hear of zero trust, all the principles of don't trust and always verify, it goes back, takes me back to the days when we all were in our, say, school, college days of learning the disciplines of engineering, networking and all, where the principle remains same, that do not open access for everybody and open it only for the people who are really required, right? So they deny all and open for accept. But those theories on a non-cloud environment versus what we are going to talk today is going to be a contrasting discussion for us to have. And with that background, I'll be starting discussing and have some discussions coming along. Himanshu, we have seen with respect to the adoption of cloud, there are various challenges, but one of them is the sense of insecurity. And we could see that reflected in the poll also. It could be for various reasons, right? Now, one place we are talking about zero trust principles, another place we're talking about security itself as a core of cloud. How do you see that happening? And do you believe that insecurity is one of the reasons why adoption is low? If so, how would you have done this in your enterprises and helping it run over? Your thoughts so much on that?
First of all, good morning, everyone. Thank you, Manish, Shiva. I actually want to start with the example that you gave back in our lives during college days and during school days. I'll actually go back to the kindergarten level. I think we teach our kids, do not trust anybody, right? So that's the theme I would like to start with, that let's start inculcating that particular learning, not only in our lives, but in our technology environment as well. So you asked about the insecurities of adoption of cloud and the artificial intelligence. I think the biggest one, the challenges which is there, which comes to a practitioner's mind, the technology buyer's mind, is the perceived lack of control. So it's like in the traditional setup, you had your own data centers, you had your own racks, you had your own machines. It was always a kind of belief that it's right there in my in front of my eyes. But where is it in the cloud? We have lack of control, we have lack of understanding. There are papers available, there are audit trails available, there are so many literature available, but still that's as a human tendency that comes to our mind, that how do I control something which I don't own per se. Again, data protection and privacy related aspects, of course, the paradigm is ever changing. Security is always a moving goalpost. Today there is one compliance, tomorrow there is another compliance. So managing those multiple compliances in an environment which I perceive as not in my control, how do I manage those compliances? And the data protection perspective. So that's another challenge which comes to my mind. Another perspective I want to add, and that's my personal opinion, I would say, trust in the cloud service providers. So we have seen so many attacks, and in the poll in the previous question, I think the maximum number of people responded about the threat protection and the response. We don't know what is the threat landscape. So it actually builds to the first point, which I say lack of control or perceived lack of control and understanding of the environment. How do I manage? So that trust in the cloud service providers. So I think collaboration with the cloud service providers, the platforms and the practitioners is something which would reduce this insecurity.
Right. So we acknowledge that there is insecurity, right? So I think that's the first point, that we acknowledge that it's not very open, it's not very comforting. And as a human, anything which is in front of us, we believe it is true, which is not, we have a bit of a tendency. And this could definitely be seen as a point of concern. And trust, it would take a lot of time to develop, right? Even we as a human will take a lot of time to have that done. And if you have instances that you mentioned about of breaches, it definitely shakes up the interest.
Absolutely.
So we acknowledge that it is a problem, but it's going to take a while for us to have those examples of practically experiencing getting it through. Building over it, Shiva, so not trusting anybody, verifying is one element, and then principle of least privilege is another way for us to ensure that the security dynamics are being handled. And least privilege principles are not only for cloud, but they are also from the regular technology platforms that we leverage. Based upon your experience and learnings that you may have, how you believe this principle of least privilege has really helped you adopting zero trust or equivalent technologies when you are taking cloud journeys in the process?
So I'll go back to 5 years back when we used to work in a startup. And whenever an engineer or anybody comes for the access, we used to give the full access.
You used to give full access?
Full access, yes.
Okay.
And to answer your very first question, our industry is adopting the zero trust. I would say mostly no.
Yes.
They don't even heard the word of zero security.
Trust.
So they do not care about security, most of this, especially the small startups. So they just want to work faster and faster.
I'll interrupt you here. Can we do a quick poll? Can we just raise your hands who believe they're adopting zero trust? It's very on the fly. So if I believe there are 100 people in the room, I don't even see 10 hands up. So that's a reality check, guys. I just thought of hearing him out that industry is not doing it. I thought industry is just in front of us. So zero trust as a program, principle, platform, concept, whatever we may say, forget about being on cloud. I think that's the point you're highlighting, right? But we are still taking a while to do it. I think it has been a topic of interest for all of us as security professionals, but for some reasons, we are not able to get through. But I just sort of doing a quick check. Thank you for those who at least raised hand and gave a perspective. It is even less than 1% of this room that we believe are doing a zero trust. But thank you so much, giving it back to you.
So, and it's not only about that cloud is probably insecure. I have seen 2 ransomware attacks in on-premise solution. There was no cloud. And then we decided to move on to the cloud because of those problems which we faced, I think, in 2016 or 17. So when we talk about the privileges, most of us, what we do, when you log in onto the system, after that inter-service communication, there are a lot of other communications after login. So they do not use proper authentication and authorization after you have entered onto the system. If you take the example of firewalls are not sufficient. It is just stopping you from the very outer wall. But when you are inside, you can access others' data, others' privileged data. 2 years back, I had an incident. There were 2 roles onto the system. One was supplier, one was customer. And coincidentally, we were not sure how it happened, but on the same machine, supplier also logged in and customer also logged in. And their token got exchanged. Now supplier was able to see the customer's data and customer was able to see the supplier's data.
Okay.
Because we were not doing the proper authorization and user access calls in each and every communication from the front end and the back end. So what was the session management, what got messed up, we didn't know. But in each, so then we came to know about the zero trust. In each and every call, I do not trust you.
Okay.
You are logged in onto the system, that doesn't mean you have free access of all the resources. Whether you are admin or whether you are a customer. You do not have access. Coming back to the infrastructure part. So when you...
and just building over it, how difficult or easy was it for you to implement this? When you said you started adopting zero trust principles, what sort of a change management difficulties you had?
Adopting is very easy. It's not...
It's easy?
Yes, it is easy.
Okay.
So securing the environment from the software perspective, it's not that difficult. Today, we have a lot of technologies which can do it, in a day, in a week.
So technology adoption easy?
Yes, technological.
But what about the people part? How were they reacting to it? Somebody who had access to almost everything.
Yes.
And you're saying now it's zero trust. For even getting into a call doesn't mean that you have a full privilege. How are you able to adapt and get that change management being taken care of?
Yeah, so that is the difficult part. The people who have had the accesses and then we remove
They feel
the
restricted
accesses.
now. They
Yes.
feel constrained.
Yes. So that is the difficult part. The technology is the easier part.
Understood.
And so the second part is the cloud infrastructure. So you do have the access of the boxes. At the end, that is also a hardware. you do have the access. So there should be a segregation of duties, clear segregation of duties, who can access and what they can access onto the cloud. You do have the development teams, you do have tech ops team, DevOps team, you do have admin teams. It doesn't mean you give all the permissions to all the people. If developer want to log in onto the system, just want to see the application logs, he should be only given that access. For the DevOps, they should be only given the deployment access, nothing else. Otherwise, it can lead to a disastrous situation. They can, delete all the data onto the machine if they have the privileges. So there should be clear segregation of duties. And yes, one important part is when you segregate the duties, any person who is leaving the organization, that is the most risky part. Who has the access, who has the IAM keys, who has the access tokens. So what we do a monthly review of all the accesses. So review of accesses is very important because these are the manual processes. Sometimes, and especially if your admin team or DevOps team, if they are leaving the organization, on the very next day, you have to rotate the IAM keys.
Right.
Because that is very risky if they go outside the organization and then they got the access of your boxes. So the risk has a scale of 1 to 10. If admin or DevOps and infrastructure admins, they are leaving, you have to change everything.
Right.
So there should be a proper mechanism, centralized access system where you can change, and it will change the whole infrastructure. Otherwise, you would not be going to all the machines and changing the user access. So that is one part.
Great.
I actually want to add another perspective to it. Shiva, you mentioned about two different roles getting same level of accesses and tokens getting exchanged and having a lack of clarity how it happened, right? And in reality, let's go back a couple of years back. Manish, you would know what I'm saying, and many of us would vouch for it. Let's talk about the software development, quality assurance, and user acceptance testing, right? It took us many years to have that bifurcation built, right? Earlier, it was just like, okay, I'm testing in the development environment or I'm testing in the production environment. But now that level of maturity is there. That bifurcation, we have been able to build that. People think twice, or a tester would think twice before testing in a live environment, right? So that is the vision which cybersecurity practitioners would have. Is it going to happen in quick succession? May not. Because speed is the key. You come from that kind of industry where if you have to turn up an app, it's like I asked you yesterday, it's already late, right? So from that perspective, how do we ensure that the minimum baselines, whatever that are anticipated to be from the cybersecurity perspective, they are built in? And that's where the artificial intelligence comes into picture. So reduce that lead time and give the business the required apparatus to run the new campaigns and everything. I think the cloud adoption would only enable us. But yes, of course, we have to take care of the minimum baseline security standards and those bifurcations in terms of who should have what kind of accesses.
Yeah, well, thanks. The discussion is, every time we are going back, it is making me realize we have so much to learn from the past. We're talking about the future, but we have so many examples to learn from our school days, colleges, and early days of infrastructure development. Couple of reflections. What I heard from Shiva and Himanshu, we are not talking anything new. This is the principles that we all know are required: maintaining the instance base, maintaining the right privileges, and the fact that whether you have the right roles and segregation of duties, whether that's on cloud or on-prem, the principles don't change. It's all about adoption, right? And it's not that it's going to be spoken for the first time. Another interesting thing I just recall about Zero Trust, I was talking to a few of the global teams at one of our large enterprises, and their biggest difficulty was, Manish, how do we identify that I have reached Zero Trust? There is no target stage, and that's the reality. It's an iterative process. And it's not about you do this and you are at Zero Trust. No, there is no certification, there is no target stage for us to achieve. It's an iterative process. And it requires us to look into the elements of data, access, networks, device, purely from a vision of saying that do not trust anything that is coming in your environment. What data you are getting it? Do you need it? What network infrastructure you are adding to it, do you need it? If yes, then do your proper verification, access and all that goes on. So just to repeat, it's all about the process. Let's don't blame cloud for it. If we don't have the right identity and access management program, if we don't have the right ways of even identifying what roles we have in our ecosystem, what cloud as an environment will do, right? So let us get our processes fixed right up and realize that we are not chasing a target. I'll again repeat, zero trust is not about target based, it's about an iterative process that will help us keep the journey going on and of course adhere to the principles of it. Another, just to humor the situation, another interesting point that I realized when you said about least privilege, right? So for one of the enterprises, when we were talking about least privilege, the business stakeholder stood up and saying that I need maximum privilege, right? In Hindi, mujhe restrictions nahi chahiye. And then we question as to why would you do that? The answer was not there. But the fact that you are giving me least privilege, it is just not acceptable. I think that's where we as a security professional will have to make the business teams, the campaign teams that you talk about to understand least privilege does not mean that you can't work. Least privilege is a reflection that what you need is what you get. If there's a reason for us to give you more, we do continue doing it. But thank you so much for...
Sometimes it becomes an ego issue as well.
That's what I said, exactly. Ki mujhe, why are you giving me least privilege? But without even knowing, as to when you are the practitioner, so I'm sure you have much more examples to share. But that is something I came across where the question was not about what privileges. It was saying that you will not give the least privilege to me, maybe ego issue, what you said.
That's a reality, Manish, and that's a reality, Shiva. Both of us, all three of us know about it, and many of us would know about it, that why do I have to enter an SMS that comes to my mobile every time? Multi-factor authentication. Why is it asking me password every time? Why do I have to enter a password when I log in from a different network other than the office network? I mean, those are the pointers which the security practitioners have to make an effort in making the leadership, the business users, understand the perspective of risks. Okay, your password may have been compromised. So it's a verification process. It's for our own data. It's for our own enterprise. So a little bit of that effort in terms of making the leadership team, making the actual users aware and learn about those potential risks is the key.
Absolutely. And then building on the least privilege, there's also an element not only about the identity and role, also about the access. So what access permissions are being granted, and as I said, that whether it's on-prem or on cloud, they have to be kept a check on, and it has to be revised on a periodic basis. Now, taking that as an underlying principle of zero trust and cloud, can you share examples how the access management part you have been able to take care of?
When we first encountered an audit, it was from an agency. So they started asking about the least privilege. What is your review process? And we were totally blank. What is this? I mean,
review process with respect to access.
Access management.
Okay,
yes.
access. Okay.
How do you ensure? So the only thing we were ensuring is when person is leaving, we were blocking the accesses. So the immediate thing so there are two parts, authentication and authorization. Authentication, so if you can enable SSO in your applications or onto any cloud solution, so that is the safest part, because when a person goes out from the organization, the IT, the very first thing they do is disable the email ID. That means that access has been removed from all the areas. So we were thinking that, okay, we were already doing it. But when the auditor asked, okay, suppose a person is in the company and his department has been changed.
As a role change.
As a role change. His role has been changed. Then he still have the access and he still have the active SSO. He can log in onto your system. So then we started setting up the process. It is still manual, and I think it will always be manual, that user access reviews. So we started doing it quarterly. Because you have to provide evidences. So in audit, you have to provide evidences as well for each and every step you take.
Right.
So we started quarterly reviewing of all the accesses, not only for the cloud, not only for the boxes, but for all the applications, internal and external applications.
Got it. So again, it's about process, right? So get your process right first.
Right.
Before you talk about the application of the cloud environment, you go it. So we spoke about that, we acknowledge that there are insecurities in cloud setups, which we are facing as a challenge. Then we spoke about having the right roles, least privileges, and of course doing the right access management with the underlying strong layer of processes. Himanshu, question for you. When the adoption of clouds, when we migrate to cloud setups, for very understandable reason, there is a hurry of going live, ensuring that the business impact is minimum. In my experience, usually I have seen that intentionally or unintentionally, the security configurations would be left as default. And maybe we don't pay attention to those because we got our shop live running, business users are happy, application are running, everything is happening on time. But as a security professional, does it make you worrisome?
Absolutely.
What do you do about it?
Absolutely. So you brought in the right chord. So when we go to cloud, the cloud service provider has a framework or there's a terminology, shared responsibility model. Now, as a practitioner at the cloud adoption or an enterprise which is moving to the cloud or adopting cloud, maybe infrastructure, maybe applications or whatever perspective. But when it comes to the shared responsibility model, the responsibility at our side actually is taken. Sometimes we feel okay, we have moved to the cloud. What may go wrong? This may go wrong. He mentioned about it, right? There was a third party, and there's a large dependency on the the supplier ecosystem or the third party ecosystem. Again, I would touch upon another important aspect, which is the skill set. So a combination of utilizing the services from a third party, not directly from the cloud service provider. I think that's how the model is, and the lack of skill set and the lack of understanding of the responsibility as a shared services model or a shared responsibility, shared security responsibility model is causing this kind of thing. Again, let's go back to the time we bought a firewall. Okay, many years back, firewalls were the first line of defense. They still are in large amount of networks. By default, I bought the firewall. I put it in the network. By default, the setting comes as allow all. After many years, when we realized, okay, it should not be like this. It should be deny all by default. So it took a while. I think it's the same. So that level of understanding, that level of maturity, it will take time. Like you said, is it really like, okay, we have reached there, the ultimate nirvana? No, it is not going to happen. There will technologies continuously grooming within cloud and cloud native technologies. But as the foundational aspect, the core, restrictions in terms of the accessibility, in terms of the identity management is something that we need to build. So that's where practitioners have to work with the business users that, okay, this is a new environment. We may have to put in certain additional responsibilities, additional controls. It is in our benefit only. So a win-win situation for both. So we need to make the business users understand. While we are reducing the lead time by going into the cloud, there is a landscape which is getting increased, right? So that's the perspective.
Sure. Anything to add?
I'll also give an example of this default configuration. So suppose if you're using AWS or GCP, you have one box. And if you have the IAM keys to log in onto the server, you can log in. So by default, any external person can log in if they have the keys. But what we have done in our organization, this is the default configuration. Anybody can log in onto any machine. So we have approximately 200 to 300 of machines. None of the machines can be accessed from outside. Only 2 boxes can be accessed from outside AWS network, from VPC. So if you want to access any machine, we have done the configuration that this machine cannot be accessed from outside IP. Any internal machines can connect it. So that's what we call jump server. Jump server is a concept like there's only 2 gates available to enter onto your infrastructure. First, you log in onto jump server. Yes, that is only machine which can be accessed from the outside. You log in onto the jump server, and then you can log in onto any other machine. So each and every machine by default, which could have been accessed from outside, it has been restricted. So by default, it makes you more secure if you restrict these type of permissions and not living with the default configuration.
Sure. So I think it's again goes back to what sort of a hardening programs you have. And again, for me, this is the third instance where we are hearing from the experts, get the right process. So if you don't even have a right process of saying once you have migrated to the cloud, you need to look into the default configurations, what the cloud as an infrastructure would do, right? Unless until it is scoped out. Then second, I think interesting point, Himanshu, that you mentioned is about skill set. That's really a big dependency, right? We as an enterprise may not be equipped to review or to even if we review and if we know that they are the default configuration, then what should ideally be the right configuration? I think there's a journey to it. But at least there has to be a program and a process which is not dependent on your cloud infrastructure, that whenever you are going for the new deployments of that kind, if there are default configurations that exist, they have to be reviewed and they have to be streamlined accordingly. Great, thank you for that. Maybe now next, let's tweak and talk a bit on the regulatory side of this whole zero trust on cloud. Data is the core, and end of the day, there are ongoing regulations that we are observing on data with respect to privacy, cross-border, which some or the other way impact our cloud strategies as well, right? What are your opening thoughts when you talk about zero trust principles of ensuring don't trust, verify everything, then you have a cloud in center, and then you have regulations which are adding the mix to this cocktail. Any thoughts to it?
Yeah, so there are multiple parts of it. One is how are you storing the data? Most of the places what I have seen, they only store the encrypted password. Nothing else is encrypted. And we don't know that all the personal information should be encrypted, the PII data. And in India, I think in last September in 2023 only, the first time the data protection law also came into picture, just like GDPR. So when you read the data protection law, it's basically for your own benefit, although government is taking it. So in data protection law, it says that you cannot store the data of citizens outside India. You cannot store extra information of any citizen. For example, if you need any information from a citizen, you first have to take the consent that, okay, he is ready to share the data. Second, the data which is required can only be stored. If you do not need email ID for any of your processing, you cannot store it. So these are the compliances that when we came to know, I think in last January only, before this protection law came into picture, someone told me that something like GDPR is coming to India as well. I didn't give a second thought. I was thinking that why would I go and verify? Let's start taking the measures. It's for our own benefit. Half of our infrastructure was in Singapore.
Okay.
And half of our infrastructure was in Mumbai. And it was from long time, 8 to 9 years back. I spoke to some of the DevOps and infra team, why did we do this? Why not in the same region? They did not have answer. It's just like that. Because they did not even think about it. Because I like the Singapore name, I am just spinning the instances in the Singapore. We started migrating applications from Singapore to Mumbai. And it took approximately 5 to 6 months. The production environment migration is not an easy task. So all the data we moved, even when production law came into picture, before that we were finished our tasks. So we migrated all the data onto India. Second part is data minimization. If you do not require data, you have to delete it. If user has left your platform, you cannot store his information for longer time. And the third part is the PII data encryption. So which type of encryption? One is data at rest. Data at rest is like whatever is stored in your databases. One is data which is traveling. Are both the data encrypted properly? Are you using HTTPS or SSL mechanisms to travel data from front end to back end? So are you using proper protocols? Are you using proper encryption method, two-way encryption? So these are the encryption we need to ensure. I mean, if you just, it's not about the compliance which governments impose on you. For example, if you take the example of traffic, if traffic police stop penalizing you to jump on the red light, what would you do on the next day? Would you start jumping because they are not penalizing it? So basically, you do not have to read about the compliances. First, do it by your own.
Sure. Thanks for that. In fact, that reminds me, anything you want to add, Himanshu?
Yeah, I think my hunch is choosing Singapore could have been, you're talking about 8 to 10 years back, could have been in India, there was only one availability zone if you're talking about AWS. It would have been from the disaster recovery perspective. But now that a lot of CSPs are having focus on India, we are now seeing more and more availability zone from the disaster recovery and the higher availability perspective. There's another aspect to it. It's like we all have data, right? So one of the mindsets that business would have is collect everything. It may be useful tomorrow, but the regulator says collect only what you require. However, unless and until you don't make it a mandate, the practice of collecting everything and utilizing it maybe never would not stop. So as a cybersecurity practitioner, there is a collaboration which is required with the industry, the representation from the business, their requirements and the regulatory bodies. There's a very strong collaboration happening at the banking sector, but is it happening in the manufacturing sector? There's a strong collaboration happening in the e-commerce sector, but is it happening equally well in the automotive, in maybe national critical infrastructure perspective? So data protection, the privacy aspect that you have brought, I think there's a lot of ground to be covered. If we compare it with GDPRs of the world, I think only a bunch of penalties have been put in globally since the time GDPR was put in, but they were hefty. Penalties is one part of it, but I think awareness and joint review mechanisms with with the regulators and the business enterprises is the key. I think penalties definitely would help, but not in the beginning. I think first we need to educate. First, we need to educate on, okay, have you classified your data? First and foremost, do you really require it? So those are the things.
Yeah, thank you. And I'm also very, very confident that this whole episode of privacy and data protection in India is just taken a baby step. It has to go many, many miles away. Few reflections and bringing my experience. I was talking to a large enterprise and their concern was how to maintain privacy in cloud. And when this question was asked to me, I said, how do you maintain it not on cloud? Forget about cloud. What do you do in your day-to-day business to give reflection and have the right protection of data and privacy of the personal information that you have? What cloud has to do in it? Which goes back, again, for the sake of repetition, everybody, I'm again saying, do we have the right processes? Forget about cloud as an environment and talk about it. Now, if we as an enterprise, going back and stealing what Himanshu said, if we believe as business that the need of the hour is to collect as much as you want and figure out later why you need it, it has nothing to do with the cloud or a non-cloud, right? I mean, cloud can just provide you as much space as you want, but at the end of the day, you are responsible to protect it. Second, the larger the canvas we make, the difficult it is for security professionals to control it, right? So contain and limit it. Now, these principles of privacy are required irrespective of the adoption of cloud or on-prem. And going back to the point, Shiva, that you mentioned that after you don't need the data, certain period of time, the data has to be removed. When we were conducting a workshop for a few of the enterprises and we spoke to the business leaders asking, what is the data retention / erasure policy? Okay, simplistically put, what is the end of the life cycle of data? And the question that was raised to me is that, Manish, data has an end of the life cycle as well. Forget about erasing it. So we as a business user always believe that if you have data, it has to retain with us for affinity, which I think is not being objected with the laws coming in. And it is easier said than done. Three of us can spend half an hour talking about it, but practically, it's just so difficult. According to me, how we ensure the privacy and the data protection requirements, the first step is what I say, KYD, know your data. Do we even know what data we have? Why we have the data? And get away from the myth of saying that if I have the data, I'm the owner of it. That's the biggest problem. Because I have data in front of me, I get to see and use it for whatever purposes I can. But this whole philosophy of saying that I'm a data custodian and not a data owner. Data owner is who? You are all the data owner. I am the data owner. The data belongs to an individual. So the day we start adopting these principles, whether for an application which is being driven from an on-prem or a cloud environment, those elements will be taken care of very well. Additionally, I think you mentioned very good about the banking. Yes, I mean, we all know RBI had mandated about all the credit card transactions data to be brought into India. It was a big transformation from infrastructure standpoint of view, especially for our colleagues who are working in the banking and the credit card sector. But end of the day, it all happened. It's about being aware. It's about starting at the right time. I'm really appreciative, Shiva, you said that you didn't want to wait for the law to come. You started your journey ahead of time. I have not come across many professionals who would do it. In fact, the approach is that let the law come, let the so-called rules be out, let us learn from what others are doing, then we start our journey. Unfortunately, you never know, it may be too late in the day. But again, going back, protecting data is going to be critically important. Again, one of the principles of ZTA, after we spoke about the security configurations, we spoke about identity, we spoke about least privilege and access, and then comes the core at the data. Believing we all have done a good job on the data user networks and the infrastructure part, my last question to both of you, how about the collaboration between the stakeholders within an enterprise? What really makes the cloud journey successful with ZTA principles or even vice versa? Because I have heard many times, you are the one who asked us to go on cloud, so it is your responsibility to get it done right. Any examples and experiences with talk about the collaboration, be it with the third parties or even with the internal stakeholders who maybe want to contributing to it? Any thoughts?
Okay, I'll start first. So collaboration is very important. It's like we want this application to be up and running. You do whatever you want to do. So it's an order which is given to the technology team. Vis-a-vis, the access to cloud is so easy. You just need a credit card, right? And in a couple of dollars, you have the access to, you can spin up an EC2 instance, or you can spin up an Azure instance or a GCP instance within seconds, right? And you have your server or whatever infrastructure available within a couple of hours. You have it. Now the problem comes when you're about to integrate that particular instance, or in a nutshell, that particular server, cloud server, into your environment. That's where you don't know how to integrate, and that's where the technology team comes to know, okay, there is something which is being onboarded. So this is a sad reality. I think the collaboration needs more integration between the business and the technology teams. We are in the right direction. I think these awareness programs is actually one of the steps towards talking about the cybersecurity aspect. And even if you can take away 1 or 2 pointers, I think that's one step towards. A point of introspection before I hand it over to you, Shiva. I think this is from a live case that I have seen is, you mentioned about we disabled the Active Directory instances, we disabled the email IDs.
For exiting employees.
We ensured the single sign-ons are integrated or all the apps. Trust me, a lot of ERPs, I'm not naming any ERPs, but a lot of ERPs, which is the core of business ecosystem, have actually SMSs or mobile numbers entered for users for daily, weekly, those kind of reports. People do forget about disabling those SMSs, and that's the sad reality. That's where your point comes into picture, know your data, where all do you have data? And your point, does data have life cycle? Is there anybody who is actually looking into, okay, I presumed your ID is disabled, you should not be getting any reports, but next day, the person who is no more in the organization, his email ID, his or her email ID, all the accesses has been dropped, he or she is getting the SMS on the mobile phone. This is the daily report, this is the targets and everything. So I think from that perspective, a collaboration is also important.
Great. Your thoughts?
So, in my perspective, I think from last 2 years, with the collaboration with the business teams and other teams, we migrated our on-premise QA infrastructure, non-production infrastructure onto the cloud. The reason was primarily, it's like the very minimal TAT of spinning the instances, running up the applications. When we had the data center, that was a third-party data center. If you need a machine, you just drop an email, maybe within 5 hours or next day, they will give you the machine. So if you want to work with speed, you have to choose cloud. But again, the security aspect comes into picture because that is not in your possession. What they are doing on their behalf, you do not know. But yes, you have to trust. And I think cloud has evolved a lot. It's not like it has came into picture from last 2-3 years. I think it's almost a decade for AWS. For GCP, I think it's 6 to 7 years. And there are multiple other cloud providers. Oracle also came into picture. Microsoft Azure. Yes. So basically, it's now a decade. So they have also started building that trust onto the organizations. So it's no longer that we do not trust cloud providers. But yes, you have to choose the cloud providers very carefully. Go for the standard cloud providers because they comply with all the compliances of the government, whatever is necessary. So they take care of that.
Yeah. So I think absolutely the clouds and the cloud providers have matured, but have we matured to leverage them?
Yeah.
Are processes adapted to do it?
It's
They
a
will have
very
their
slow
default
process.
configuration, but are we able to have a process saying that your secure default configurations do not adhere to my requirements? They will be happy to uplift it, but then somebody has to question that, right? So
it's like we are also evolving. I mean, I haven't seen from in last 3-4 years a summit of zero trust. Now we have also started talking about that. If you have started talking, then you will be able to do it. Maybe with a slow speed, some will be do at a fast speed, but yes, we have started talking about it.
Great.
So that's a good part.
Absolutely, and my experience of collaboration has been, and I was sharing with the panelists before we entered the room, that wherever we have seen cloud adoption requirements being raised by the business, those are of much more success rates versus the one where technology is, I'll not say pressurizing, but proposing that why don't we go to cloud, right? So it's a sheer element of how the collaboration and the requirements go hand in hand. And collaboration is just not about saying, okay, we are in the one game, but also the element that how technology team is well equipped to understand the process nuance. I'll give a very small example. I'm already getting a blinker saying the time is up. For one of our clients, the CIO had done an implementation of a large cloud setup. Application was running all fine. The application, presume, let's say it was for about performing a review, and somebody has to go and confirm that the review of the process has been done. Application went live, everybody was doing it. But people were not ticking that particular checkbox. And it was just a simple problem because technology team didn't know that this is a requirement, and because of lack of collaboration, if at all I have to use that word, maybe the training was not adapted. So people were filling in all the evidences, all the supportings, but the tick mark was not happening, and because of which, the alerts were continuously going to the user saying that you have not completed the particular review. And the idea when it was done on RC, it was simply a tick box, and ultimately the blame was put that the technology team did not do the right configuration, whereas it is a very different reflection for us to understand how collaborative you are in programs of this kind. But many more stories, examples is going to share. But just to conclude, we started by saying that there is a sense of insecurity, considering the fact things are not in front of us. We believe the trust is yet to develop. And we concluded by saying that it has to be a collaborative approach by taking due care of networks, devices, infrastructure, data, and the regulation along with the least privilege and the access configurations. Thank you so much for hearing us. Hope it was helpful. And we start doing zero trust principles on-prem, on cloud, depending upon where we are. Thank you so much for having us here.